Hi guys, James at Goddard Radio Moscow Beer and Metal Reviews again for you today. Now for this one we're going to review a beer from probably the best known Australian craft brewery actually, and this is the newest addition to their range. So we're going to go to Little Creatures Brewing, who most of you will have heard of, and have a taste of their IPA, which I believe only came out a few months ago. And I'm actually quite lucky here in Geelong because we have the sort of East Coast brewery of Little Creatures there, and it's got a really nice food hall and things, so it's a good little haunt just to kind of go down, have some food and enjoy some nice beers as well. But these guys are originally from Western Australia, Fremantle. But as is usual with my reviews then, I'll take you through a brief history of the brewery. It's quite short, but if you don't want to stick with me for that, just fast forward a few minutes into the video, you'll get right to the tasting. As always, the brewery website's in the video description for you below, along with a link to my other Little Creatures reviews that I've done so far and the ones that I will do in the future. So anyway, as I mentioned to you, this brewery is based in Fremantle in Western Australia, just near Perth, and Fremantle Harbour actually serves as the port of Perth, which is the capital of Western Australia. Now the name Little Creatures is inspired by lyrics from the Talking Heads album of the same name, and the name also refers to the live yeast cells that turn the sugars in malt wort into alcohol during the brewing process, and this was the thought that went on when they actually chose the name for it. But the brewery was established in 2000 by Howard Cairns, Nick Tromboli and Phil Sexton, who had been employees at the Matilda Bay Brewing Company, which was actually Australia's first craft brewer, and I've reviewed one of their beers for you already, and this brewery opened in 1984. But in 1997 the trio discussed the possibility of brewing an American style IPA, and this was ideal because Phil Sexton had actually worked in the development of the Bridgeport IPA during his time in America, and the name Little Creatures was posed by Cairns after reading about the little creatures wandering between alehouses in the Hobbit novel by J.R.R. Tolkien obviously, and he thought that this actually sounded like yeast fermentation. But this pale ale was brewed and first presented to the Australian market in early summer of 2001, and that's January in Australia, of course, with it being in the southern hemisphere. But in 2002 the brewery was named as the champion Australian brewery at the Australian International Beer Brewing Awards, and the pale ale was crowned as the champion ale. And this is really, the pale ale is the one that you'll find in a lot of the different countries, but you can sometimes find the other ones like this one, and the bright ale seems to be quite popular as well. But the original brewery building in Fremantle was originally built to house the Kookaburra yachts that were to participate in the 1987 America's Cup, and it also served as a crocodile farm before being converted by Little Creatures for use as a brewery. And today it contains a cafe where you can eat some food and sample the beers, and you can also get tours of the brewery at 1, 2 and 3 every day. They also have a tapas bar in Fremantle called Little Creatures Next Door, which sells a lot of craft beers and some of the local wines, and has a view out onto the harbour as well, and the pictures of it look beautiful. But I can tell you that the East Coast operation has a very nice setup as well. But today they also, as I mentioned to you, they also have the second brewery in Geelong in Victoria, and we're about 52 kilometres away from Melbourne here, and they also have the Little Creatures food hall there, and this was opened largely due to the kind of demand that Little Creatures were getting. Their beer is very, very popular here, and of course a lot of breweries that start in Western Australia do want to move and get an East Coast operation because the bulk of the population in Australia is on the East Coast. But for being such a big country, there is only 23 million people here, so in that kind of sense it is relatively small, but beautiful country nonetheless. But anyway, that's your kind of brief history, if you like, of the Little Creatures Brewery. I hope you enjoyed that. Just to list the other beers that you can get from Little Creatures, of course, you have the Bright Ale, Rogers Beer, and both of these are described as being English style pale ales, but some people say that the pale ale is also an English style pale ale, but some say it's American pale ale, so there's a bit of a debate there. But you have the IPA here, which is really like an American pale ale in my opinion, and they also have the Pilsner beer as well. There's also a number of single batch beers that are produced every so often, and they're available only in a very limited supply, but they're apparently very, very good, and the reviews on Rate Beer and Beer Advocate seem to agree with that. But the company these days is part of Little World Beverages, which is a subsidiary of Lion Nathan, which itself is owned by Kirin. So if you go all the way back, the company is essentially Japanese owned. But anyway, let's get on to the tasting of this beer itself. As I mentioned to you, this is the newest one in their range, and it comes in at 6.4% on the Richter scale, so it's a 6.4% India Pale Ale. I'll just bring up the camera and let you have a little look at the artwork on this one. Quite similar actually to the Pale Ale, just of course it's got a kind of Christmassy green label on it, this one, but it's not a seasonal, it's one of their regular core range now. Apparently they'd had the idea for this beer for quite a long time, but they just never really got round to doing it. They didn't have the tank space for it apparently. So you can see that's the standard Little Creatures bottle cap on this one. And one thing you can always see on the top of these beers here, this one of course says Fremantle Western, or says Fremantle Australia, but and this is quite odd that this one's from Fremantle, but we have the brewery right next to us in Geelong, which is obviously this beer's come all the way from Western Australia when really it could have just got one from the Geelong brewery, so not quite sure what's going on there. But anyway, let's get this guy open and we'll get on with the tasting here. So I've drunk this beer quite a lot and I can tell you that it is a bloody good beer, especially on tap, so let's see how the bottle conditioned one goes down. So as you can see, oh, that was an accident, but oh well, it happens sometimes when you're doing your videos. You can misjudge how the head is going to go. Oh well. So there you are. As you can see, it's poured a very nice kind of sort of orangey amber colour. If I just bring that up and let you see it there, it's got a solid kind of two-finger, slightly creamy coloured head rather than a completely white one. There's a little bit of sediment just floating around in the beer there. Just a very small particles actually. If I put my fingers behind that, you can see it's completely transparent, and there's a good little bit of carbonation just kind of going up towards the top of the glass there, so it does look, it's a very attractive looking beer. It actually looks very similar to how it does on tap, except you get a lot more of very small carbonation in that, but very attractive looking beer, and it is I really like this one. This is probably my session beer since I've been down here in Australia. So let's give it a smell. It smells very kind of grassy actually. That's the big element in the nose of this one. I would say that on tap you get a lot more grapefruit and orangey character coming out of it. But yeah, it's mainly a kind of grassy character that comes out on this one. The malt's quite present in this actually as well, I should point out. There's a good bit of biscuity kind of sweet caramel malt that comes out just in the nose. I'll try and sugar it up a little bit more. Yeah. It's mainly, there's a little bit of the kind of orangey and grapefruit coming out, but it's mainly a kind of biscuity malt I think that comes out from this. But there is a good bit of grassy character like I was saying, and some pine resin in the nose as well. But it's not quite as hoppy in the nose as it is in the taste, I would say that definitely. I'm not sure if that's just the bottle conditioning, because normally on the tap one you can smell the hops come out a little bit more. And you can smell it, it kind of comes in on the top end of the nose if you like. You can get the fruity kind of oily character out of it, but if you just kind of breathe it in normally like that, you do get the more biscuity flavours coming out, or the biscuity notes I should say, kind of biscuity and bready malts. But it's quite a simple nose on this one, but it does have a big taste, so let's get into that. See, one thing you do notice about this beer, and it is a kind of comparison to the Pale Ale if you like, these beers have a big oily character in my opinion, and that really helps bring out the kind of hoppiness of the beer, and underneath it, it has that kind of similar malt base that you expect from the Pale Ale as well. You've got a nice kind of really sweet caramel and biscuity malt base that backs this beer up. Yeah, it's got a good, around the edges of the tongue you get a really nice kind of orangey citrus flavour, and that just goes right around the edge of the tongue. There's a good mix of kind of grapefruit in there too, and there is that element of pine resins, particularly on the edges of the tongue. You get a good bit of kind of piney resin character in there, but there is an element of grassiness, you know, that kind of sort of almost smoother, less aggressive grassy flavour that comes out on this one. But yeah, in the middle of the tongue you've got a nice biscuity malt flavour. There is a little bit of bread element to it as well, I would say. That just kind of blankets the back of the tongue. And you've got a sweet kind of caramel flavour that kind of pushes towards the front of the mouth, where you're starting to get the hoppy flavours just around the edges of the tongue, which is quite nice. It has quite a bit of oily mouthfeel to it, and that's one thing that really helps bring out the kind of orangey and grapefruit citrus in that. sorry, I'm saying grapefruit isn't a citrus fruit, it's bringing the orangey citrus and the grapefruit flavours out. But yeah, it's got a big hop presence in it, this one. Nice oily fruity flavours just around the edge of the tongue, as I say, some pine resins in there, but there is a kind of underlying sort of herbal character to this one, and you'll notice it. It's in the taste. It's almost a little bit spicy, if that makes sense, but it's not spicy in the malty sense. It's a little bit in the hoppy sense. It's got a good aromatic-y character to it at the same time, but it's got that big herbal aromatic-y character in there that just kind of is a little bit of a subtle element in the flavour profile of this beer. It's really nice. So you've got a nice oily mouthfeel in this one. It's kind of mid-bodied, light carbonation in it as well. That's maybe one thing that it makes it a little bit heavier going in the heat down here, I would say, but it doesn't affect the flavour at all. It's really nice oily mouthfeel, and it helps bring out the fruit flavours. It's got a good bit of dry character as well, which you can get it just around the edge of the tongue there, which is really nice, but it's got a long lasting bitter character to it as well, which is really nice, and it just sits on the edges of the tongue, which is really good. And I do enjoy this kind of, when you have these IPAs that are very bitter and have that nice dry character to it. So overall, this beer kind of does have the kind of typical elements that you expect from Little Creatures. As I said, it's got that nice kind of sweet caramel biscuity malt base that you've seen in the Pale Ale, which obviously is a very popular beer, but it does have that different kind of hop edge to it that you expect from a kind of proper American IPA. So this is a really interesting one that I would recommend you try. It's actually, I would say that the bottled version of this is really quite similar to the tap version. The tap version maybe has a bigger aroma to it. That's one thing I would say, and maybe the caramel malt comes out just that little bit more. But overall, it's very similar, and the bottle conditioning on this one is really good, and I think that's the kind of general thing for most of the Little Creatures beers. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. I've enjoyed doing another Little Creatures one for you, and I will do the rest of their range in the next little while. Really good IPA in my opinion. As I said, this is the one that I tend to drink quite a lot when I've been down here in Geelong. So I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. Please comment in the section below and let me know your own thoughts on this beer. Always interesting to hear that. And please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff, and I will catch you soon with my next beer review. Cheers.